Shalom, friends. So, Chaim Alevsky here, Chabad Family Programs of the West Side. We're just a few days after Pesach. Still inspired by Pesach, and I thought I'd share some wild and wonderful things I learned over the holiday. Some more familiar than others. We know about the splitting of the sea. That's a big event in the Jewish tradition. And there's a lesser known splitting of a river that didn't happen yet. Maybe that's why it's not so famous. But it is recited in the Haftarah of the final day of Pesach. So to give a very quick context overview, we celebrate the Yom Tov days of Pesach. We celebrate two holy days in the beginning, in which we have the ceremonious Seder, the Sedarim, and then the final days of Pesach, the seventh and the last day of Pesach, we celebrate holy days again, Yom Tov. The difference between the two, or one of the main differences between the two, is the theme, that in the first days of Pesach, we focus more on the past, on our exodus from Egypt and the experience there, and also our current relevant emotional and psychological exodus from our own Egypt, from our own boundaries, borders, and limitations. And then the second days of Pesach, it's called Shavi'i Shel Pesach, the seventh day of Pesach. It's divided into 2 days, the seventh and the final. On the seventh day of Pesach, we talk about the splitting of the sea. We're actually celebrating that God split the sea through Moses for the Jewish people when Egypt was chasing them. And then on the last day of Pesach, Acharon Shel Pesach, we focus almost exclusively on Moshiach, on the concept of Moshiach, as is demonstrated by the Haftarah. And that's what I'm going to focus on today. Beautiful thought from the Rebbe in 1951. The Rebbe explained an obvious question to those who might be aware of the two splits. It says we already had the splitting of the sea way back when, 3,333 years ago. What do we need the next splitting of the river? It talks about in the Haftarah in Isaiah, Yeshayahu, chapter, I think 11, number 15. It talks, and throughout, it describes beautifully about Moshiach, about the Messiah, the Redeemer. And it says that if a shoot will come forth from the house of David, of Jesse, of Yishai, and he'll be full of wisdom, of strength, of might, and influence, and he'll change the world for good. So it describes the person himself, then it goes on and describes the world, that the world will change in positive ways. The lion, the wolf will lay with the lamb, and a child will lead them, etc., etc. A lot of beautiful things. But one puzzling verse is that Moshiach will lift up or wave his hand on the river. Vehenif yado al hayam, ba'ayam rucho, with the might of his hand, and he will divide it into 7 paths. V'yechalkehu, or something like that, l'shiva nechalim. So the Torah says that Moshiach will split the river into 7 paths. The Rebbe talks about this and asks, what was the function of the splitting of the sea by Moses, by Moshe, versus in contrast to the function of the splitting of the river by Mashiach. This is a beautiful thing. These are some unknown concepts that give a lot of perspective into our whole purpose in life, in this world, and how it's progressing in history. So he goes on to say that both of these splittings, both of the sea and of the river, are both really preparations for something greater that is going to happen. The Rebbe explains that there are many miracles that God effected for the Jewish people, and some of them are for military victories, and others have other purposes. The splitting of the sea, the miracle of the splitting of the sea, was not to save the Jews from the Egyptians, although the Egyptians were at their tail, and the sea was like this reservoir. The sea was right in front of them. But as the Torah tells us, the Jewish people entered the sea and came out the same place where they entered. They did literally a U-turn. So the Rebbe explains, Hasidus explains, that the splitting of the sea was not a military miracle in order to save them. It was actually a miracle to prepare the world and the Jewish people for what was to be next. What was to be next? Matan Torah, the giving of the Torah. Now, what happened at the giving of the Torah, and how did the splitting of the sea prepare it? Make this very short, because this is obviously long, deep, and wide as the sea. But the point that we're going to talk about today is that before the Torah was given, the spiritual world and the physical world did not join, did not merge ever. They were completely separate. If one wanted to be close to God, they needed to be spiritual and divorced from the physical. If one was connected to the physical world, they would be divorced from God. God had a decree that the heavens will not touch the earth, and the earth won't go up to the heavens. Moving on, God decided to change that at Matan Torah, at the giving of the Torah. He decided to change that whole paradigm and unite the forces of the spirit and the physical, and imbue the physical with the ability to be elevated and godly. So much so that it became the focus of the world before the Torah was given, like our forefathers Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob, and others that wanted to get close to God. They had to be spiritual, and anything they used physically, even the tefillin that they wrapped, was not holy. It didn't become holy, and it just stayed a material thing that you could throw out and toss. However, now, after the giving of the Torah, or at the giving of the Torah, God canceled that decree, and He joined the physical and the spiritual, and enabled the physical to become godly. And it's specifically through the physical mitzvos, through the mezuzah, through the tefillin, through the kosher food, observance of Shabbos, our physical material experiences is how we become godly. So we look at God, we don't say God is spiritual, we say God created both the spiritual and the physical, and when God decides which path we should use to get closer to God, that is how we get closer to God. And today it's primarily the physical with a little bit of spiritual icing on the top. So, the splitting of the sea was a preparation for the giving of the Torah and for this unification between heaven and earth. How so? Simply speaking, the sea covers that which is in it. It's a symbol of the concealed, that which is hidden. The splitting of the sea is symbolic of the revelation of that which is hidden, revealing the concealed. Of course, this is a very long and lengthy topic, but suffice it with that. So when God wanted to prepare the world to reveal a deeper level of connection with God into the physical material world, He split the sea. He revealed that which was previously hidden. That was the splitting of the sea. Moving on, we have Moshiach is going to come now, God willing, today, And he says he's going to split the river. Now, what is this river that he's going to split, and why? What's the difference between a sea and a river? A sea is a large bowl, a container of water that prevents the water from going elsewhere, from going out. Rivers, on the other hand, are gushing water. They're flowing. It flows from a higher place to a lower place. It's constantly flowing. The river, the sea, represents our level of connection with God that is hidden and is not revealed. The river represents that which is revealed, that's flowing and gushing and pushing forth. So once the Torah was given, now we have a river flowing. We have the godly energy, the godly wisdom flowing through the river to the rest of the world, watering the world. That's the function of a river. So if the Torah is already out, and of course we're bouncing back now between the metaphor and the lesson. If the Torah is already out of its cage and the sea had already split, and now we have rivers, why do we need to split the river? That's the question. Says the Rebbe, splitting the river is necessary because although the river is flowing and the water is gushing and the Torah is being taught and learned and observed and adhered to in the world, however, the river is also hiding something. It's hiding its source. Where does the river get its water from? Says the Rebbe, the river gets its water from the fountain. Now the fountain is called in Hebrew, it's called Ma'ayan, the Ma'ayanot. The fountains which are deep underground, they're called Mayim Chaim, living waters. They're called Mayim She'ein Lehem Sof, eternal waters, infinite waters. So the river represents, the source of the river is represented by the fountain, which represents metaphorically the source, the God himself, the essence of God, where everything comes from. So splitting the river, when Moshiach will come, he will split the river to reveal the source of the river. What does this mean for us? And another way to say it, Moshe Rabbeinu split the sea in order to prepare the world for the revealed aspects of the Torah, which he did. Moshiach will split the river to prepare the world for the hidden aspects of the Torah, for the mystical teachings, for the essence of the Torah, for the light within the Torah, for the source. And that is the function of Moshiach. And that is also what the Rebbes from the Baal Shem Tov and on have been starting the process by giving us a taste of the Torah of Moshiach, of the teachings that will be in the times of Moshiach, which are infinitely greater, deeper, the light within the Torah. And on a mystical plane, just from the Sephirot, for those who are into that, we're now in Sephirat HaOmer. We're counting the Sephirah, the days, and we also talk about the 7 attributes that we have from Chesed, Gvur, Tiferet, etc. So relating to the Sephirot, we know that in the chain of creation, there's 4 worlds: Atzilus, Bria, Yetzira, and Asiya. Atzilus is the highest world. Each of these 4 worlds contain the 10 spheros: Chachma, Bina, Dad, Chesed, Gvur, Tiferet, Netzach, Hod, Yesod, and Malchut. In the world of Sephirot, the splitting of the sea is the Sephirah of Malchus, Malchus of Atzilus. It's the lowest level in the highest world. And it's the lowest level because it contains everything from above. Malchus is the sea, is the bowl, it's the concave that contains everything from above, but it's closed. Malchus Atzilus was the spiritual world, great infinite light of God, that didn't connect with the physical world until the splitting of the sea. When the sea split, it means that the Malchus of Atzilus opened up and let itself into the next three worlds, Bria, Yetzira, and Asiya. We call it Bia. Bria, Yetzira, and Asiya. So that's what happened with the splitting of the sea. At the Malchus of Atzilus, the lowest level of Atzilus, opened itself up and illuminated the rest of the world, the physical world, enabling the connection between the spirit and the physical in the physical world, in our world here today. And the sea, the river, actually, the gushing river, represents the level of Bina. So Malchus is the lowest. Bina is number 2. Chachma, Bina. The spark of wisdom and the expansion of understanding. Bina is a gushing river represents Bina. Bina hides or contains with it and comes from Chachma. The splitting of the river that Moshiach will effect represents Bina revealing its source, which is Chachma, which is the first level of our interaction with God in this world, in this physical world. I know it's a little abstract, but I thought it's a beautiful, beautiful way, just wild and wonderful, to get a little bit of a glimpse into the Torah of Moshiach, which is taught by the Hasidic rabbis. We're getting a glimpse into what's going on behind the scenes. More another time. God bless you. Let's hope the river gets split soon and we'll see Moshiach for real.